Hey guys, I'm just going to go through the rest of the notes with you guys, and then I also need to introduce the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary. I apologize, I'm not at school today. Just school field trips, stuff like that. Other aspects of the job, it's just been the perfect storm this month, but I promise it won't happen too many more days, okay? So we have to talk about the United States and Cuba. If you recall, we left off on Friday with the Spanish American War and the effects of that. So the United States dominates in the Spanish American War. 10-week war, less than 500 Americans killed in combat, but the United States receives Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam. So the first part of this video, this Ed puzzle, is going to look at our intervention in both Cuba and the Philippines. Now, here's the deal with Cuba. Cuba had somewhat of a, you could call it a quasi independence because it's like they kind of had independence and they kind of didn't. And that's because of two separate amendments. The first one literally gave Cuba their independence. It was known as the Teller Amendment. So whenever the United States went to war against Spain, we added as part of the war resolution, the war declaration, we tacked this amendment on that said that we promised that we would give Cuba their independence. Okay, an easy way to remember that this is tell her, tell her, tell her, tell her. We told Cuba, her, okay, that she we'll just reference Cuba as a she, was going to have her own country, her own independence. And we also promised that the United States would leave Cuba or withdraw after the Spanish American War was done. We did not really do that. But on paper, at least, we gave Cuba their independence. However, as soon as Cuba started, being an independent country, obviously, first things first, you got to set up a constitution. You got to organize your government. And the Platt Amendment, which was tacked on to Cuba's constitution, really gave the United States an increased ability to control Cuba. Okay, it's because the United States, could get directly involved in Cuban affairs. Okay, so anything that was going on with Cuba, the United States was in the know. Anytime Cuba wanted to conduct business with a foreign nation, they had to let the United States know. It's almost like it was like baby steps for Cuba on the road to become independent. We could pass laws for Cuba, and you got to think about how asinine and crazy this is. I mean, we wouldn't like it very much if China or Russia or whoever passed laws for us here in the States, but we did that in Cuba. And last but not least, we used Cuba as a military base. Okay, we were allowed to construct Guantanamo Bay. Okay, which, if you do not know what Guantanamo Bay is used for, it's used to like interrogate like suspected terrorists. Okay. Now, the squabble in the Philippines, okay? So you get the point with Cuba, okay? We promised Cuba their independence, but that did not exactly pan out. I would not exactly say, based on this, that Cuba had true, full, and free independence. Philippines, there was no doubt about it. There was no illusion with this. We did not give them their independence at all. And if you don't know where the Philippines are at, if you look at this map right here, you see they're in Southeast Asia. So in a group of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, just to the south of China, a little bit north of Australia, and way far south of Japan. So why on earth did we get the Philippines? Well, again, the Philippines had been a colony of Spain, like Cuba, okay? Like the Cubans, the Filipinos had been trying to win independence away from Spain in the late 1800s. Again, they saw an opportunity with all these other movements across the world, all these people earning the right to self-determination or the ability to rule themselves from the Spanish. The Spanish is an empire that is crumbling. It's starting to lose its power and its strength. And so the Filipinos are trying to take advantage of that. I mean, Spain's having to worry about the Cubans over in North America. Now they have to also worry about the Filipinos in the Pacific. So we get the Philippines after defeating the Spanish. And you have to think, okay, so again, we get the Philippines from Spain as a result of the Spanish-American War, one of the provisions in the Treaty of Paris. But you have to think about it like this. On paper, if you're the Philippines, the U.S. has just taken control of you. You'd probably feel awesome about that. Why might, on paper, if you think about it, why might they feel optimistic that the United States is in control? And think about like our founding values in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Well, our founding values are, all men are created equal, according to the Declaration. Everybody has the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all have the right to, pursue whatever it is that, or go after whatever makes us happy in life. And in this case, what would make the Filipinos happy was their independence. But we were literally willing to go against our own national principles in order to not grant the Philippines their independence. So the United States does not recognize Philippines independence. Some in Congress want to give the Philippines their independence, but ultimately, there are more that want to keep the Philippines than there are the naysayers. And so, for 3 years, from 1899 to 1902, in the Philippines, the United States sends troops. Why? Why are we in the Philippines? All to do what? Why are we in the Philippines? What are we not wanting to happen? And that is give them their independence. Now, why did the United States want the Philippines? So, this is in your notes. I'm asking you. I want you to write in your Ed puzzle right here what you notice in this picture. Now, so what is this picture implying? Well, you have the USA over here, right? The US. Uncle Sam is stepping on the Philippines. Okay. Now he's going to China. And what is he bringing to China? Well, look, they're wanting all kinds of cars and rails and clocks and trucks. It's all these goods that have been produced because of American industrialization. Okay. So all these goods are being produced, and we're wanting to go over to China. And the only way we can get to China is to go through the Philippines. Now, why did we have to go through the Philippines? Why did some think that the Philippines were necessary in order to get to China's markets? Well, we take control of the Philippines. You guys saw on the map, Philippines are knocking on the door to China. They're a major, major set of islands right near the coast of China. So many thought that if we got control of the Philippines, that it would give us easier access to China, and we could sell the goods to China. Now, because it wasn't just the United States, a lot of countries were wanting to take their goods and sell them in China. And why might that have been the case? Think about the demographics or the population statistics of China. Why would they seek China as a market above other places? Okay. And what's the answer? It's because of people. All of the millions and millions of people that are living in China, we see this as a potential market for all these goods that have been produced in the United States. More people, more goods to sell. Now, this is another reason why we did not want to give the Philippines their independence. Okay. Now, let me move these menus around a little bit and hide that. Sorry. All right. I'm going to try out this pen real quick. Let's see. Okay. So, right here, okay, you have Uncle Sam. Okay. You can always tell it's Uncle Sam because of all the stars and usually the beard, all of that. Okay, we know this is Uncle Sam. Boom. All right. Now, what is Uncle Sam holding right here? What does this look like? It's a baby. So this represents the Philippines. Now, before I go into detail about the rest of the cartoon, what do you think this shows about how we viewed the Philippines? What did we view them as? The Filipinos, what do we view them as? Now, so the Philippines is a baby, and in order to get the Philippines strong, what are we feeding them? And I gave you a caption right here. What are we giving and feeding the Philippines in order to make them big and strong? What is the United States, Uncle Sam, will provide? Civilization and education. Now, why can't we just this lady right here? There we go. This lady right here represents Filipino independence. All right. How would you describe this lady? Just by looking. Now, so what on the lady, not the most attractive looking lady, let's just say that. Kind of scary, honestly. It says that on this lady represents Filipino independence, and it says robbery, ignorance, murder, theft. So think deep here. What is this implying? Okay. What is this implying in the United States that is going to happen if we allow the Philippines to have their independence? Okay. And don't just take the words off the side. Think about what these words are saying. What is going to happen in the Philippines if we let the Philippines have their independence? What this is saying is that if we allow the Philippines to have their independence, there will be a sense of lawlessness. Okay, there will not be any order. Crime rates are going to soar through the roof. It's going to be barbaric if we allow the Philippines to have their independence. So it's better if Uncle Sam just feeds the bebe, the civilization education, so that it can get big and strong and become its own country, because apparently it's not ready for this. Okay? Let's see. Back. There we go. Now, here's another quote. We must never forget that in dealing with the Filipinos, we deal with children. Okay, so some in the United States literally viewed them like this. You guys saw that in that last picture, right? I mean, it was literally a baby that we were spoon feeding. Okay, because obviously we didn't think they could rule themselves. He said, I agree with my colleague Henry Cabot Lodge in his idea that the Filipinos are no more able to govern themselves than primary school children are to run an entire school system. Think about what this is implying. It's saying that imagine if for one day in our school we let the second graders at Trigg County Primary School run our school system. What that? Now, let's say for a month to give you a better scope of that. What would that be like if we let a bunch of first graders or second graders from Trigg County Primary School run our school system for a whole month instead of Mr. Thorpe and Mr. Mangles, Mr. Bayman, and Mr. Bush, Mr. Garnett? What would it look like? Think about that. Well, chaos, right? And so this is saying that like we didn't think the Philippines were ready. They weren't ready to be their own country, so we had to kind of teach them the right ways. Now, the war in the Philippines is brutal. Okay, only a little bit over 4,000 Americans are killed in the fighting, which, if you recall, that's more than the Spanish-American War. But we don't talk about this war as much, and part of that may be the fact of what this war was like. Because I mean, we killed 200,000 Filipino people, all because what did the Filipino people want? What was so drastic that they wanted? What were they fighting us for? Independence. And what's crazy about that is you think about the United States' own history. We were, back around the 1770s, 1780s, we were a plucky little group of colonies that was rebelling against, the strongest nation in the world. And we won our independence. And here you had the Philippines who are trying to get the exact same thing, and we're unwilling to give it to them, and we're willing to go to war to prevent that from happening. We even set up concentration camps in the Philippines, and you're like, oh, isn't that what the Spanish did to the Cubans that we got so outraged about? Yes, but we also did it in the Philippines to the Filipino people. And it's just one of those things. American history, I did not learn about this till college. We kind of like to sweep it under the rug. It's not something we really cover a lot, but it's important that we do not forget it. So the result of the war in the Philippines is the Americans obviously win and take over. We had said that we were going to get the Philippines their independence by about the middle of the 1910s. That does not happen. During World War II, Japan takes over, and some in the Philippines start to support the Japanese more than the Americans, so it divides the country. After World War II, we beat Japan, gain the Philippines back, and then finally, after 40, 50 years, we grant the Philippines their independence on July 4th, 1946. Now, why did we pick this date, July 4th? Because this was symbolic. Why did we pick July 4th to be the day that we gave them, the Philippines, their independence? Very good. It was our Independence Day. And you look at this picture, okay? And this is a pretty cool picture right here because you have Harry Truman, who was president at the time. But what's even cooler, sorry, the lights go off. What's even cooler about this is the American flag's coming down. The Filipino flag is going up for the very first time. And the Philippines are still an independent nation to this day. Now, this next part you are going to write on notebook paper, okay? And all you have to write is the Monroe Doctrine overview. So we're going to go through this slide by slide. I'm going to explain it so you focus on one part of it. So you just have to write this and this, okay? You don't have to write all of this. I'm just giving you the background of this. So, the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine is very, 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 very important. So, how important is the Monroe Doctrine, according to me? How important? All right. It's very important because it is a foreign policy that the United States adopted over 200 years ago, but it is still cited some to this day. So it was President Monroe, James Monroe, he addressed Congress in 1823 about the growing concerns of European settlement in the Americas. And it basically outlined a way for us in Europe to interact with each other going forward, with Europe having colonies in the Western Hemisphere. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, when I say Western Hemisphere, I am talking about North and South America. Okay, that is the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so basically it said how we were going to interact with Europe. Go with Europe with them having colonies over here. What were we going to do? And there were 4 parts of the Monroe Doctrine that we're going to go through one by one. Okay, number 1, the United States would stay out of European affairs. Okay, now, so we followed this for a really long time. Okay, which affairs we're talking about wars and conflicts. How did the United States not follow this policy? How did we go against the Monroe Doctrine during the 1900s? Some conflicts that we're going to talk about later this year. How did we not stay out of European affairs during the 1900s? What did we get involved in? Okay, good. We got involved in World War I and World War II. Okay, but for most of our history, we wanted to stay out of Europe. We wanted to stay out of European affairs. We wanted to be by ourselves and not worry about going off. Remember, this was the advice that George Washington gave us whenever he left office in 1796. Now, what is this policy known as, where we want to be by ourselves, kind of on an island, so to speak, and we don't want to intervene or interfere with other countries? What is that known as? Starts with an I. Isolationism. Okay, so this is some of those principles coming into play here too. So we're going to stay out of Europe. We're not getting involved in Europe's crap, Europe's business. Other thing that we told European powers is we would not mess with their existing colonies. Because at the time, Europe was still clinging on to some colonies over here in the Americas. Like, for instance, Spain still had Cuba at this point. So we said, listen, we understand you got colonies. That's great. But we're not going to mess with the existing ones. You're allowed to keep those. But, and here's the big but, Europe could not get any new colonies, because this was another part of the Monroe Doctrine and what Europe was expected to do. No nation could form a new colony in the Western Hemisphere. So remember, the existing colonies were fine, but we stated this and made this very clear. No nation was allowed to form a new colony in the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere was closed for further colonization. Okay? And here's the other thing. If Europe did this, if a European power came over here and tried to colonize, hypothesize for a sec, think before I go to the next slide, what would the United States view this as? We told them not to. They're going to come over here anyway. What might we view this as? We might view it as an act of what? An act of aggression, aka an act of war. We've outlined that, listen, we stay, I'm going to try to stand up at my desk. Okay? We stay way over here. Okay, we stay way over here. We're in North America. We're minding our own business. Y'all are way over here. We're gonna stay out of y'all's business as long as y'all don't come over here and mess with us. So y'all can stay over here. Y'all can have existing colonies over here. But if y'all try to go from Europe right here to North America and get new colonies, nah. We are going to view it as an act of aggression. That is the Monroe Doctrine. Y'all might be laughing. Okay, but this policy has been cited recently in presidencies as recent as Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. So it's still something that is a big part of American foreign policy to this day. Now, so quick rundown of the Monroe Doctrine. So that's what you'll need to write down. Okay, this is on the slides. So just U.S. would stay out of European affairs. Europe could keep existing colonies in the Western Hemisphere. No nation could form a new colony in the Western Hemisphere. And if European countries try to colonize, we would view it as an act of war. These are the four main parts of the Monroe Doctrine. Now, why? So you don't have to write this down. Why were we so worried when Monroe issued this thing? Well, European powers were still, poking around in North America. Russia had been up and down the coast, what is this? This territory that used to belong to Russia? What would this eventually become? What state? Good, that's Alaska. And then you look down here, okay, Spain still had a considerable influence throughout the Southwest. I mean, this is California, this is Arizona, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Texas, obviously, even parts of Oklahoma. Okay, the Spain, up even into like southern Wyoming. Okay, the Spanish have a extensive empire. I told you all that the other day, and they really do. Throughout all of this area, the Spanish are still in control. Now, they would lose all of this to Mexico. Mexico would win their independence in 1823, but for the time being, Spain still has control of this. Okay, in 1821. So this shows you how the European powers still had an influence in the Western Hemisphere. And you have to think, Spain loses Mexico in 1823. Okay, Mexico wins their independence. What's Spain going to try to do? They're going to try to come on back into the Western Hemisphere and get their land back. Now, the Roosevelt Corollary. Okay, so the Monroe Doctrine was issued in 1823. Okay, the Monroe Doctrine was issued in 1823. However, the Roosevelt Corollary was issued by Teddy Roosevelt in 1905. Okay, so you're looking at a time span of over 80 years here. Okay, but what Teddy Roosevelt did is, like I said, the Monroe Doctrine is still cited to this day. It's still a fairly significant part of American foreign policy. Teddy Roosevelt decided to add a sticky note, if you will, to the Monroe Doctrine. Add just a little stipulation. So remember, what was the main idea of the Monroe Doctrine? It was to prevent us and who from being separate? What powers? And that is Europe. It was to prevent us and Europe from being separate. The Roosevelt Corollary was issued because we were worried that European countries were wanting to become more directly involved in the Western Hemisphere. There was some issues in Venezuela and other places throughout Latin America where European countries were starting to poke around. And we were worried that they were going to come over here more. Okay, we did not want them in our hemisphere at all. The United States is starting to grow after the Spanish-American War. We don't want European powers poking around in here. So what the Roosevelt Corollary stated is that it would allow the United States to remove any unfriendly governments in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so any countries throughout Latin America, so like Central America and South America that were quote unquote unstable, we would be allowed to go into and take over. And we would also be allowed to quote unquote help them, assist them. But a lot of times this helping and assisting looked like military force. And that's what it was. We used the Roosevelt Corollary as justification to go into Haiti for 20 years. We used it to go into Nicaragua. We used it to go into the Dominican Republic. And the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay? But the Roosevelt Corollary gave us this right because our logic was if we don't intervene, Europe is. And you would rather deal with us than European countries. And that's it. All right. If you guys have any questions, just shoot me an email. On next class, we are going to talk more about the anti-imperialists, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite things in the world, which is, where's it at? Oh, come on. Big stick diplomacy. But that will be more on Thursday. Can't wait to see you guys. Y'all have a great rest of your day.